Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more. And many more. And many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host today, Shantae Charles. I hope that you're having a great and wonderful day today. We have a short segment today because we're only really going to be reading, but it's two very important books. So, we started reading The Spirit of Justice by Dr. Jamar Tisby, which we are going to continue into season 17. And Reparations, a Christian call for repentance and repair. Both of these books we're going to carry over into season 17. So let's get started. If you're with me for the first time, welcome. If you're watching me through a short, welcome. So let's talk about this chapter that we are now in called Becoming African American. And we looked at why Christianity is not the white man's religion. We looked at that last week. Today we're talking about an African people. An African people. Black resistance to white supremacy and slavery began in Africa. Long before Black people ever reached the shores of North America, they attempted to assert their full humanity against slave traders while still near the lands of their birth. Slave traders collected Africans from wide swaths of the continent, not just the coast. And good morning to those of you who are coming in. Some Africans were captured farther inland and forced to march hundreds of miles to the coast. Those who survived the grueling journey faced yet another ordeal before they got onto the ships. Slave ships could not leave until they were full of human chattel, a process that could take months at a time. And good morning to those of you coming in. While they were waiting, European slave traders kept the African peoples in prisons along the coast called factories, prisons that became despicable sites of human suffering where Africans languished and frequently got sick and died. Good morning. And Pastor Ben, if you could monitor the chat a little bit for me, that'll help me out today. After that, the slavers would load Africans up in canoes and drag them on board a slave ship. Sometimes, upon seeing an ocean many of them had never seen before, and fearful of the fate that lay ahead, some Africans chose death by suicide rather than enslavement. They jumped overboard and drowned themselves rather than be taken onto the larger ships. One English slave trader in the 1690s wrote this: "The Negroes were so willful and loath to leave their own country that they often leaped out of the canoes, boat, and ship into the sea and kept under water till they were drowned." In addition to drowning, some Africans chose to starve themselves to death by refusing to eat. The choice to end one's life rather than live and be subject to the indignities and suffering of slavery emerged as a form of resistance to white supremacy and racism. Suicide may seem like an extreme reaction. To end one's life curtails any chance of earthly freedom. But for generations of enslaved Black people, the freedom of death was more desirable than a life of bondage. Repeatedly throughout U.S. history, some people decided that there were ways of living that were worse than dying. In their minds, better to choose one's own demise than to live at the mercy of the whims of those who treated you as subhuman property. Unaliving for some also held out spiritual hope. In dying, some Africans believed they would be reunited to their families and homeland in the next life. Thomas Phillips, captain of the slave ship Hannibal, noted this reality. He wrote in a journal entry in the 1690s, "We had about 12 Negroes, did willfully drown themselves and others starve themselves to death. For 'tis their belief that when they die, they return home to their own country and friends again." In these instances, death was both a form of resistance and a welcome escape to a better place. The belief that one could return home and dwell eternally in a better state than on earth points to the fact that African people have their own religions and ways of understanding spirituality apart from Eurocentric conceptions of Christianity. Even when people of African descent began adopting Christianity in North America in larger numbers, they found ways to adapt their understandings of the divine in ways that honored their Africanness. So to see that in 2025, people doing the same, they're actually continuing a through line that was all that had been true. Okay. An understanding of African spirituality formed the foundation for early Black freedom struggles in the colonial era. Some of the earliest permanent settlements in the so called New World were established by people of African descent. Communities of free and self emancipated Black people sprang up throughout the colonial era. These settlements were called maroon communities, from the Spanish word cimarron, meaning wild or free, runaway, enslaved. Maroon Blacks established their own communities in places such as Brazil, Cuba, Florida, and Georgia. One of the most renowned Maroon communities was that of the Windward Maroons of Jamaica. This group descended from people of the Coromantee tribe in Africa. When these Africans were taken from their homelands and shipped to slavery in Jamaica, they often escaped into the forests of the island and formed their own communities. Amid a male dominated society, the Windward Maroons had a distinction of being led by a woman, Queen Nanny. She was known as a fierce fighter and a shrewd tactician skilled in guerrilla warfare, which she used to defend her people against the British and keep her people free. Queen Nanny lived during the 1700s, and the Jamaican people passed down legends of her leadership. She is also revered as a symbol of Black freedom, that in 1975 she was honored as Jamaica's only female national hero. She was also known as the spiritual leader of her people. Queen Nanny was likely a chieftainess who practiced a form of African spirituality called Obeah. Maroon oral traditions attribute her military victories over the British to her superior science or mastery of metaphysical warfare, which drove fear into her British adversaries and led to her decisive military victories. As Black people resisted enslavement in the colonial era and beyond, they would enlist the power of the spiritual world to assist them in their freedom efforts. Thus, Thus, they looked to leaders such as Queen Nanny not only for tactical expertise, but for spiritual guidance as well. I encourage you to read up further on Queen Nanny of the Maroons. This is a artist rendering of her, but there's a lot more information now out on Queen Nanny of the Maroons. You can go online. There are several historical sites that have more detail on her. So we're going to pause there, but I want you to think about that, that the European or Eurocentric notion of taking one's life versus the African spiritual concept that it is better for me to take my life, live free, return home, be with my ancestors, be with my friends in spirit than it would be for me to live a life of enslavement. And I think it's important that Dr. Tisby points out that because of their own spiritual practice and beliefs about the life to come, they didn't look at unaliving the way we look at it in our culture. I know a lot of people in Western culture, they see it as like the ultimate thing to not do, right? We wouldn't encourage somebody to do that in today's culture and society. But he is bringing up the difference of thought in the mindset of people who would have jumped overboard. And I think that's important to know. All right, let's look at the book here on reparations. In case you want to know what I'm reading from and you'd like to grab it for yourself. Reparations, a Christian call for repentance and repair. The authors here are Duke Kwan and Gregory Thompson. Last time when we were in this book, we were talking about in this chapter the call to see African Americans in their full humanity. The next section we're talking about today is ways of seeing racism, and we're only going to look at one way, seeing racism as personal prejudice today. All right. Ways of seeing racism. We have encountered many people struggling to answer this call to see, laboring daily to see the truth about American racism and the way it shapes both our individual and our common lives. This is not true of everyone, of course. In every community, some are deeply resistant to seeing the truth about American racism and resistant to the vulnerability that seeing this entails. Even so, all across the United States, in churches in Memphis, college campuses in Georgia, auditoriums in Pennsylvania, dinner tables in Washington, D.C., cocktail bars in Charlottesville, we have encountered people who want both to see the truth about American racism and to respond redemptively. Over time, however, we have noticed that while many people are concerned with racism in America and are committed to engaging it, few have thought deeply about the role of reparations. While many Americans see the reality of racism, they see it in ways that, while true and ethically important, are not yet robust enough to lead to the work of reparations. Many of us need a different way of seeing race in America, one that makes reparations not only plausible, but inevitable. The task of what follows is twofold. First, we must explore three dominant ways of seeing American racism and the responses to which each of them inclines. Second, we gesture toward a different way of seeing it to be more fully developed in the next two chapters that serve as the foundation of this work. Racism as personal prejudice. In 2016, African American social commentator Heather McGhee was a guest on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. McGhee, then president of Demos, a think and do tank that focuses on equitable democratic reform, was invited to discuss the role of progressive politics in the 2016 presidential election, then underway. During the call-in portion of the show, a white man from North Carolina spoke to McGhee with unusual candor about his own racism. Introducing himself, he simply said, "I'm a white male and I am prejudiced." Given our cultural moment upon hearing these words, one might have expected either for this man to launch a fleet of justifications or for McGhee to shame him for it. However, neither did so. For his part, the man began simply to talk about his fears. For her part, rather than rolling her eyes or turning away, McGhee looked directly into the camera and gave this man her full attention. As she did so, he said something almost wholly unexpected. "What can I do to change, to be a better American?" Upon hearing these words, she closed her eyes, gathered herself in kindness, and spoke directly to the camera. This is what she said. Thank you so much for being honest and for opening up this conversation because it's simply one of the most important ones we have to have in this country. We are not a country that is united because we are all one racial group that descended from one tribe or community. That is, I think, what makes this country beautiful. But it is also our challenge. We are the most multiracial, multi ethnic, wealthy democracy in the world. And so, asking the question you did, how do I get over my fears and my prejudices, is the question that all of us, and I will say people of all races and ethnicities and backgrounds, hold some of these fears and prejudice. Most of them are actually unconscious, right? You'll say to yourself, I'm not prejudiced, but of course, we all have them. And so your ability to just say, this is what it is, this is what I have these fears and prejudices, and I want to get over them, is one of the most powerful things we can do right now in this moment in our history. So thank you. In the following days, a video of the exchange began to show up on Facebook, Twitter, and other media outlets. Some viewers responded with contempt for the man, the ignorant Southern racist who had the gall to ask an African American woman to help him with his racism. Others responded with criticism of McGee, accusing her of coddling a fragile white man who should have been confronted instead. But many responded with something like gratitude, thanking both of them for showing us something that we rarely see, especially in television, the willingness to have a painful conversation with both honesty and mutual care. Embedded in this man's question is a particular way of seeing American racism, specifically seeing it as a form of personal prejudice, as a disposition of the heart and mind. In this view, racism is largely understood as a set of individual perspective, attitudes, and bias that shape how we value or devalue human beings. As McGee noted, one of the common humiliations of our inheritance is that each of us bears prejudicial judgments against other people because of the color of their skin and the cultural heritage that this color suggests. But if racism is a heart issue, then what must we do to address it? Throughout American history, the answer to this question has always been relatively straightforward: change the heart. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, anti racist activists and abolitionists developed strategies aimed at just this kind of change. Through tracts, through multiracial speaking tours, and other literature, they sought to reshape the racist heart of Americans. During the early 20th century, the writers and artists of the Harlem Renaissance continued this work by creating works designed to confront racial blindness of white America and to help America, in the words of Langston Hughes, see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. In our own time, this work of dispositional change continues in families, in churches, in schools. In each of these initiatives across the centuries, the goal has been, in many respects, the same: to weaken the malignant power of American racism by transforming the dispositions of the heart and mind. In the Christian tradition, the language for this internal change is called personal repentance, a sacred dimension of the Christian vision of moral life. We have seen many Christians, including ourselves, take up this work of repentance with respect to racism. On the other hand, we've seen some Christians in 2025 double down and refuse to take up the inner work, and rightly so. In the Christian tradition, personal prejudice is a form of violence that harms the other by denying their God given dignity. Seeing these prejudicial dispositions of the heart, the Christian begins the long renouncing work of uprooting them from their own heart and rebuilding new dispositions in their place. This is the essential work, and we ourselves are deeply committed to it. Even so, this particular way of seeing racism as a personal prejudice that chiefly requires the work of personal repentance is not the complete picture. So, right now, and I really appreciate Duke Kwan writing about this, because right now I feel like we have two sets of uh, Christians going on right now. Some people are going to argue and they're going to say, well, they're technically not Christians. But the reality is, they keep calling themselves Christians. They keep calling themselves Christians, which is a problem for everyone else who doesn't feel that way, but are also calling themselves Christians. So, because they have chosen to attach the word Christian to their nationalism, right? Because they've chosen to attach the word Christian to their Nazism, right? That's what we have going on. Because they have chosen to attach the word Christian to their fascism, those who are not dealing in those aspects in nature and characteristics have to come to the forefront, and they have to be willing to say, this is what they are saying, this is who they claim to follow, but here's what Christianity is. Here's what Christ said, and encourage people and point people to look at what Christ said and what Christ did, and then let them compare that to what they see happening. You're not here to force anybody to believe what you believe, but you do need to make a distinction and say, hey, yes, there are a group of people running around calling themselves Christians, but here's what Christ said. Here's what Christ did. Here's the evidence of Christ's life. Now you decide, are they actually Christians? Or are they tacking a label on and trying to align themselves with the whole faith tradition, but they're not following what the faith tradition says? I think we have to start doing that, and not backing away or saying, "Oh no, they're not really Christians." No, I'm going to give you the text. I'm going to give you the evidence. I'm going to show you and tell you to read what Christ actually said and did when it came to strangers, when it came to neighbors. What did he say about who's your neighbor? What kind of parables did he teach, like the Good Samaritan? How does that line up with what these people are over here saying that they're Christians? I would like to believe that there are plenty of people in the world who can tell the difference between Christ's teachings and what they're doing. I don't want to discount the fact that people have common sense and that they can clearly read the teachings of Christ and what Christ did while he was here, and look at what they're doing in their time right now on the earth and figure out that these people are not in fact what they claim to be, right? So when it comes to personal prejudice, and the man had a good question, what can I do to deal with my fears? I think one of the most important thing that people can do to start dealing with their fears around other ethnicities and other cultures is to put yourself and take yourself out of your comfort zone. Maybe you're only in a space where you only see people who look like you all the time, every single day. Be intentional about getting out of that kind of space. And when it comes to people saying, well, I don't have any Black friends. If you don't have any Black friends, I'm going to give you a great starting point for even being in the space to develop Black friends. It's going to seem weird at first, but trust me on this one. If you don't have any Black friends, go find some Black businesses to support. Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Yeah. Go find some Black markets to support. Go find some Black stores to support. Because guess where Black people are right now? We're supporting Black owned businesses. So if you're saying to yourself, I feel really, really awkward about trying to just find Black people, go to where Black businesses are, Go support Black people in their business. I know, shocking, right? Go to where Black people are by going to support Black businesses. Let me say it one more time. And in your supporting of Black business, guess what you're going to run into? I know. Come along with me. Guess what you're going to run into? Guess who you're going to run into? Black people. Right? You're going to run into Black people. And the key word there is people, because you're going to find out, what you're going to find out is they're not different from you. We all want the same things in life: love, joy, goodness, peace, rest, the opportunity to be safe within our person, the opportunity to be economically stable, the opportunity to raise our children in peace and well-being. So yeah, if you don't have any Black friends, you don't know where to start by supporting Black-owned businesses. Show up and support. Out of that, when people see you regularly, consistently showing up to support, not approaching people awkwardly, but just showing up to support. There's a Black-owned business, Black-owned bookstore in your community, Black-owned cafe, Black-owned restaurant. Show up and support. And as you're doing that, guess what you start to build? Relationships. Yeah. Relationships with people who don't look like you. You start to meet people that come to those spaces regularly. You can start to strike up conversations. And then next thing you know, you might look up and you might have more than one Black friend. Why? Because you're making yourself available to meet people who don't look like you. And a lot of times, you're going to find out that you probably have more in common with them than not. All right? So that's my tip for today. I want to thank you all for your time and attention. I hope that I have said something or read something. I might use that. I hope I have said something or read something today that was helpful to you, helpful in your understanding. Again, we are going to continue reading these books into season 17 as we start to wrap up season 16. Monday will be our last day of season 16. We'll take a few days break and then we'll be back in November with season 17. If you're interested in the books I was reading from today, it is Dr. Jamar Tisby's The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance, and Reparations, A Christian Call for Repentance and Repair by Duke L. Kwan and Gregory Thompson. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so continue to go out and be light. We will be back on tomorrow with some money and health readings. All right. Fridays is Finance Friday and Get Free Friday. We want to make sure that we're continuing to do things to help us stay healthy, wealthier, and wiser. All right. See you then. Take care, be well, and most importantly, be light.